The lawyer's voice droned on about assets and property distribution, but I barely heard him. My grandmother Evelyn's funeral had been just 3 days ago, and now we sat in her living room dividing up what remained of her life like vultures picking at bones. Then I heard it, the wooden chest, my chest. Actually, my mother interrupted, her voice sharp and commanding. Evelyn said that chest was family property. It shouldn't be listed separately. My stomach dropped. That's not true. Grandma promised it to me. My uncle nodded quickly, backing her up. Margit's right. That chest has been in the family for generations. It belongs to all of us. The lawyer hesitated, looking between us uncertainly. My mother's voice cut through again, cold and final. My mother wouldn't have wanted to cause division. Let's keep it with the estate. You've always been dramatic, Ava, my mother added, turning to me with that look I knew too well. Grandma didn't owe you anything special. My hands trembled as I watched my uncle lift the chest and carry it toward the door. I wanted to scream, to fight, to explain that Grandma had told me dozens of times it was mine, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I ran, out the door into the cold evening air, whispering through tears, You lied. My name is Ava, and that chest was supposed to be my inheritance, not because of its monetary value, but because my grandmother Evelyn had promised it to me since I was a little girl. I'm 26 now, a teacher at the local elementary school. I grew up mostly in my grandmother's house after my father left when I was 3. My mother never forgave Grandma for taking me in, for being the parent she refused to be. Grandma Evelyn was warmth and safety in a childhood that felt cold everywhere else. She'd sit with me at her old kitchen table, teaching me to bake bread, telling me stories about her youth, always ending with the same promise. When I'm gone, that chest is yours, sweetheart. Everything you need to know is in there. I remembered her soft warning from just months ago, her hands frail and spotted with age. There will come a day they'll take what's mine, Ava, but they can't take what I've truly left for you. At the time, I thought she was just being dramatic, her mind wandering with age. Now I understood. She'd known exactly what my mother and uncle would do. That night, sitting alone in my small apartment, I made a decision. I would go back to Grandma's house and see that chest one last time. I arrived at Grandma's house just after midnight, using the spare key I'd kept since childhood. The house felt different without her, like something essential had been removed and left only a shell behind. The air smelled of dust and her signature lavender perfume, fading but still present. My flashlight cut through the darkness as I moved through rooms I knew by heart. The chest sat in the living room corner where my uncle had left it. I knelt beside it, running my fingers over the carved wood surface. Then I noticed something wrong. The lock had been pried open, the wood around it splintered and damaged. My heart raced as I lifted the lid. Empty, completely empty except for scattered tissue paper. Panic rose in my throat. I searched frantically through the tissue, checking every corner. Nothing. They'd taken everything. I was about to close it when I noticed the back panel sitting slightly loose. Using my fingernails, I carefully pried it away from the frame. Behind it, wedged tight against the wood, was a thin diary wrapped in yellowed lace. My hands shook as I pulled it free. The cover was worn leather, the pages crisp with age. I opened to the first page, and Grandma's handwriting made tears spring to my eyes. If you're reading this, they finally took everything again. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, the diary clutched in my hands like a lifeline. My flashlight cast shadows across the pages as I began to read. The first entries were dated from 30 years ago, long before I was born. Grandma's handwriting was neater then, more confident. She described small betrayals that seemed innocent at first, but formed a terrible pattern. Missing jewelry that my mother claimed to have borrowed and never returned. Letters from Grandma's sister that arrived already opened, their contents somehow known to everyone before Grandma read them herself. Whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. Margit has changed, one entry read. My mother's name made my stomach twist. She looks at me with such coldness now, I don't recognize my own daughter anymore. Another entry. Today I found my mother's pearls in Margit's room. When I asked about them, she said I'd given them to her. But I never did. I would have remembered. I felt sick realizing this pattern had begun decades before my birth, that my family's dysfunction ran deeper than I'd ever imagined. The diary trembled in my hands as I turned page after page, watching my grandmother's pain unfold in careful cursive writing. One name appeared over and over, like a dark thread running through the entries. Margit, my mother. I couldn't stop reading. The entries jumped ahead several years to the time around my birth. Grandma's tone shifted, became more worried, more protective. Margit turned cold after Ava was born, she wrote. She looks at the baby with something I can only describe as resentment, as if Ava's very existence is a personal offense. My throat tightened reading those words. Another entry, dated 6 months after my birth. I've started keeping Ava with me as much as possible. Margit leaves her crying in the crib for hours, says the baby needs to learn independence. But Ava is only 6 months old. She needs love, not lessons in self-reliance. Then, heartbreakingly, she looks at Ava with the same envy she once had for me. I don't understand how a mother can resent her own child, but I see it in her eyes every day. I closed the diary for a moment, pressing it against my chest, tears streaming down my face. My mother's cruelty suddenly made horrible sense. It wasn't something I'd done or failed to do. It had always been there from the very beginning. As I opened the diary again, something slipped from between the pages. A photograph, torn and faded. It showed my mother, my uncle, and an unknown man holding a baby. Me, presumably. But I didn't recognize the man at all. I studied the photograph under my flashlight, my heart pounding. The man was tall, dark-haired, smiling down at baby me with obvious affection. He stood between my mother and uncle like he belonged there, like he was part of the family. But I had no idea who he was. I flipped through more diary pages frantically, looking for any mention of him. Finally, I found a partial entry that made my blood run cold. He doesn't know she. The sentence cut off abruptly, as if Grandma had been interrupted or changed her mind about writing it down. My mind raced. I'd been told my entire life that my father had left before I was born, that he wanted nothing to do with us. My mother never spoke about him, except to say he was gone and good riddance. But what if that wasn't true? What if this man in the photograph was my father, and something else entirely had happened? I turned the photograph over. On the back, in Grandma's handwriting, Ava's first birthday, before everything fell apart. My first birthday. That meant my father hadn't left before I was born. He'd been there, at least for my first year of life. My mother had lied, about everything. The next morning, I returned to Grandma's house under the pretense of collecting some of her belongings. My mother and uncle were there, sorting through boxes in the dining room. I just want to grab a few of Grandma's scarves, I said, keeping my voice steady. If that's okay. Take whatever you want, my mother said dismissively, not even looking up. Most of it's junk anyway. I moved toward the hallway, but stopped when I heard my uncle's voice drop to a whisper. As long as she doesn't find that part of the diary, we're safe. I froze, my heart hammering so loud I was sure they could hear it. She won't, my mother replied quietly. I checked the chest this morning, nothing but old linens. The diary pages I was worried about are gone. You're sure? Positive. I burned them myself last week. My hands clenched into fists. They knew about the diary. They'd been searching for it, had destroyed parts of it. But they didn't know I had it. I forced myself to continue down the hallway, grabbed a few scarves from Grandma's closet, and left as quickly as possible without raising suspicion. In my car, I sat trembling, realizing just how dangerous this had become. My family wasn't just hiding secrets. They were actively destroying evidence. Back home, I tore apart the diary's binding, looking for anything hidden. My fingers found something unexpected, pages carefully taped inside the cloth lining of the back cover. I peeled them away gently, my hands shaking. The pages were older, more brittle than the rest, written in Grandma's hand but with obvious urgency. What I read made my entire body go cold. Grandma described a family trust fund she'd created when I was born, money specifically set aside for my education and future. $50,000 invested and growing. But according to these hidden pages, when I was 10 years old, my mother had withdrawn the entire amount. Margaret claimed it was for Ava's private school tuition, Grandma wrote. But Ava never went to private school. I confronted her and she told me to mind my own business, that Ava was her daughter, not mine. I remembered being 10. That was the year I desperately wanted to go to the music camp all my friends attended. My mother said we couldn't afford it, that money was tight. I'd believed we were poor. I'd worn second-hand clothes, worked part-time jobs through high school, took out massive student loans for college. All while my mother had stolen $50,000 meant for me. My entire childhood poverty had been manufactured, a lie built on theft. The next pages contained something even more damning, a copy of a letter Grandma had written to the bank manager, protesting the withdrawal. I never authorized this transaction, the letter stated. The signature on the withdrawal form is not mine. I am requesting a full investigation into potential fraud. Below that, Grandma had written in her diary, they refused to investigate, said the signature matched their records perfectly, but I know my own signature. Margaret forged it. I pulled out my phone and took photos of the pages, my hands trembling so badly I had to steady my arms on the table. Then I grabbed a sample of my mother's handwriting from an old birthday card and compared it to the copied withdrawal form. The signatures were nearly identical, but there were tiny differences in the loops and slants, the telltale signs of someone trying too hard to copy someone else's handwriting. My mother had forged Grandma's signature, had stolen my entire future, and Grandma had known but been powerless to stop it. I now had evidence, proof of fraud. But what could I do with it after all these years? Would anyone care about a theft from 16 years ago? Still, I photographed everything, storing the images in 3 different cloud accounts. If my family could destroy evidence, so could they destroy me. I needed insurance. My phone rang that evening, making me jump. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity, and a need to know how much she suspected, made me pick up. Hello. Ava, her voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. About what? Stop digging into your grandmother's things. You're only going to hurt yourself. My blood turned to ice. How did she know? I'd been so careful. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play games with me. I know you've been back to the house. I know you're looking for something. Her voice dropped, became almost threatening. Your grandmother was a confused old woman toward the end. Whatever you think you've found, it's not what you think. I haven't found anything, I lied. Good, keep it that way, for your own sake. She hung up before I could respond. I sat staring at my phone, my hands shaking. Then a horrible thought occurred to me. If she knew I'd been to the house, had she been watching? Had she somehow gotten into my apartment? I rushed to my desk where I'd left the diary hidden inside a hollowed-out textbook. It was still there, untouched, but my laptop was on. I never left my laptop on. Someone had been in my apartment. I flipped frantically through the diary, my heart sinking. Several middle pages were missing, torn out roughly, leaving jagged edges. I'd been so careful to check every page when I first found it. These pages had been there yesterday, which meant someone had broken in while I was at work and removed them. I wanted to scream, to cry, to call the police. But what would I say? That someone stole pages from a diary that technically belonged to my family anyway. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to think. Grandma had anticipated this. She'd hidden backup pages in the lining. Maybe she'd hidden more. Then I remembered something she'd told me years ago, when I was a teenager. We'd been sitting at her piano and she'd said, "If you ever need to tell me a secret, write it down and put it in the music box. I'll find it." The music box, an old brass thing that sat on top of her piano. I grabbed my keys and rushed back to Grandma's house. It was late, nearly 11, but I didn't care. Using my key again, I crept inside and went straight to the piano. The music box was still there, dusty and forgotten. I opened it carefully, and tinny music began to play. Inside was the usual old jewelry, buttons, random trinkets. But when I lifted the velvet interior lining, I found something else. A small digital recorder, no bigger than my thumb. Back home, I plugged the recorder into my laptop with shaking hands. The file loaded slowly, and then Grandma's voice filled my small apartment. "If you're listening to this, Ava, it means I'm gone and you found your way through the breadcrumbs I left you." Her voice sounded tired but determined. "I'm recording this because I need you to know the truth, and I'm afraid I won't live long enough to tell you in person." I clutched my laptop, tears already streaming down my face. "I've been watching your mother and uncle for years now. They've taken so much from me, money, jewelry, my peace of mind. But the worst thing they took was you, in a way. They poisoned your relationship with your father, Ava. He didn't leave willingly." My breath caught. "They drove him away with lies and manipulation. Made him think you'd be better off without him. He fought for custody, did you know that? But your mother had money, lawyers. She won, and part of the settlement was that he couldn't contact you until you were 18. I pressed my hand to my mouth, sobbing. "By the time you turned 18, he'd moved away, rebuilt his life. I have his contact information hidden for you. But that's not the worst part, sweetheart." Grandma's voice dropped lower, more frightened. "If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident. They've been watching me, pressuring me. They know I have evidence of what they've done." I replayed the recording over and over, my grandmother's words burning into my brain. The final diary entry I'd read suddenly took on new, horrifying meaning. I grabbed the diary and found the last dated entry, written just 2 weeks before Grandma's death. "I fell again today," she'd written. Or did I? I remember standing at the top of the stairs and then shadows, 2 of them arguing, then pain. They said I tripped, but I don't remember tripping. I remember hands. My vision blurred with tears. Grandma had described the accident that would kill her 2 weeks before it happened. I remembered the funeral, my mother's composed face, her calm voice as she explained to relatives. It was quick. She didn't feel any pain, just a terrible accident. But it wasn't an accident. My mother and uncle had been in the house that day. I remembered because my mother had called me, telling me not to visit Grandma that afternoon because they were handling some family business. By evening, Grandma was dead. I pressed my hands over my mouth, afraid I might be sick. My own mother, my uncle, they'd killed her. Killed a helpless old woman because she knew too much, because she was about to expose them. "You did this, didn't you?" I whispered to the empty apartment. "You murdered her." I couldn't sleep. By morning, I knew I needed help. I called Mr. Talbot, Grandma's lawyer, the one who'd presided over that awful will reading. "Mr. Talbot, I need to speak with you privately. It's about my grandmother's estate." He agreed to meet me that afternoon at his office. When I arrived, I brought the diary, the recorder, and all the photographs I'd taken. I laid everything out on his desk. "My grandmother was murdered," I said without preamble, "and I can prove my family has been stealing from her for decades." Mr. Talbot's face grew grave as he examined the evidence. He listened to the recording, read through the diary entries, studied the forged signatures. "Miss Ava," he said slowly, "your grandmother came to me 6 months before she died. She suspected something terrible was going to happen. She wanted to change her will, but she was afraid that if she did it too obviously, it would accelerate things." "What do you mean?" He reached into his desk and pulled out a sealed envelope. My name was written across the front in Grandma's handwriting. "She made me promise to give this to you only if you came asking questions. She said you'd figure it out, that you were smart enough to find the truth." My hands trembled as I took the envelope. "What is it?" "Open it and see." Inside the envelope was a single piece of paper, a codicil to Grandma's will, signed and notarized. I read it twice before the words fully registered. In the event that my granddaughter Ava can provide documented evidence of financial misconduct or fraud committed by any member of my immediate family against my person or estate, the following provisions shall take effect. All property, including my home and remaining assets, shall pass solely to Ava. All previous bequests to other family members shall be considered null and void. I looked up at Mr. Talbot, my heart pounding. It means if you can prove what they did, everything becomes yours. The house, the investments, everything. Your grandmother made sure of it. But why didn't you mention this at the will reading? Because she made me promise not to unless you came forward with evidence. She didn't want to put you in danger by making you a target. But if you found the proof on your own, if you were brave enough to seek the truth, then she wanted you protected. I stared at the document, my grandmother's love and foresight overwhelming me. She'd known. She'd known exactly what would happen, and she'd planned for it. So the diary is your proof, Mr. Talbot finished. Combined with the recording and the forged signatures, you have a case for fraud, possibly even for wrongful death, though that would be harder to prove. What do I do now? He looked at me seriously. That's up to you, but I should warn you, this will destroy your family. I called my mother and asked to meet her for coffee. My hands shook the entire time, but I forced my voice to stay steady. She arrived looking annoyed, like I was wasting her precious time. What's this about, Ava? I'm very busy. I slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of the diary pages, the forged signatures, transcripts of the recording. This is about you stealing from Grandma, from me. Her face went pale, then flushed red. She opened the folder, her hands shaking as she flipped through the pages. This is ridiculous. These are forgeries. Your grandmother was senile. Stop lying. My voice came out louder than intended, drawing stares from other customers. I lowered it, leaning forward. I have evidence, recordings, proof that you forged her signature, stole my trust fund, manipulated everyone around you. You can't prove anything. Actually, I can, and I will if I have to. Her eyes narrowed, turning cold and calculating. You think you can destroy this family with a few scribbles in an old diary? You think anyone will believe you over me? Yes, because Grandma documented everything, years of everything. My mother stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. You're just like her, obsessed with revenge, trying to tear this family apart. I won't let you. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, leaving the folder on the table. I sat there shaking, but also feeling something new, power. That night, I completely broke down. The weight of everything, Grandma's death, the betrayal, the lies, crashed over me like a wave. I almost burned the diary, almost destroyed all the evidence just to make the pain stop. But as I held it over my trash can, lighter in hand, I noticed something I'd missed before. Faint writing in the margins of several pages, so light I'd overlooked it in previous readings. I grabbed a flashlight and examined the markings more closely. Numbers, coordinates. My hands started shaking again as I typed the coordinates into my phone's map application. They pointed to a location in Grandma's backyard, the garden shed. At midnight, I found myself back at Grandma's house for what felt like the 100th time. The property was technically still in probate, so I wasn't trespassing, but I felt like a criminal as I crept around to the backyard. The shed was old, filled with rusty tools and bags of soil. I searched frantically, moving everything aside until my fingers found a loose floorboard. Underneath was a metal box, locked tight. I pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside was a VHS tape in a plastic case, labeled in Grandma's handwriting, "For truth." The next morning, I took the tape to Mr. Talbot's office. He had an old VCR set up. Apparently, he kept it for reviewing old case evidence. We watched in silence as the screen flickered to life. Grandma's face appeared, older and more frail than I remembered, but her eyes were sharp and clear. "My name is Evelyn, and I'm recording this as insurance," she said directly to the camera. "If you're watching this, my own children have failed me, but I won't fail my granddaughter." The video cut to a different scene. My mother, sitting at Grandma's kitchen table, signing documents. Grandma must have hidden the camera somehow. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" my mother was saying. "Signing over power of attorney." "I don't have much choice, do I?" Grandma's voice came from off-camera, weak and resigned. "You've made that clear." The video showed my mother signing Grandma's name to multiple documents, bank forms, property transfers, legal papers. Signing them right there, in clear view, while Grandma watched helplessly. "There," my mother said, satisfaction in her voice. "All taken care of. Don't worry, Mom, I'll make sure everything is handled properly." The camera angle shifted. Another scene. My uncle, this time, searching through Grandma's desk while she slept in her chair nearby. Mr. Talbot and I stared at the screen, watching years of manipulation and theft unfold in grainy video. "She recorded everything," I whispered. "Everything you need," Mr. Talbot confirmed. Mr. Talbot looked at me seriously across his desk. "Ava, if you go public with this, it will destroy them. Your mother could face criminal charges. Your uncle, too. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Grandma, about her kindness, her love, the way she'd protected me my whole life. I thought about how she'd died alone, afraid, pushed downstairs by the children she'd raised. "They already destroyed me," I said quietly. "They destroyed Grandma. They deserve whatever happens." "Then we'll need to be strategic. I'll contact the district attorney's office and provide them with the evidence. Meanwhile, you should document everything else you've found." I nodded. "There's one more thing I want to do first." "What's that?" "I want the truth to be public. I don't want this swept under the rug or settled quietly. Grandma deserves better than that." Mr. Talbot considered this. "There's a journalist I know at the local paper. She specializes in family crime stories. Would you be willing to talk to her?" "Yes, I want everyone to know what they did." I left his office feeling lighter somehow, despite the weight of what was coming. Grandma had given me the tools. Now I was going to use them. The article came out on a Tuesday morning, above the fold on the front page of our local newspaper. "Family fraud hidden in plain sight. Grandmother's video diary reveals years of abuse." The journalist had done her job well. She'd interviewed me extensively, reviewed all the evidence, and crafted a story that was both compassionate and damning. The article included excerpts from Grandma's diary, stills from the video, and expert analysis of the forged signatures. Within hours, it was everywhere. Shared on social media, picked up by regional news, trending on local forums. My phone exploded with messages. Old friends reaching out in shock. Distant relatives I barely knew offering support. And dozens of messages from people who'd experienced similar family betrayals, thanking me for speaking out. But there was one phone call that mattered most. "Ava," an unfamiliar male voice, hesitant and hopeful. I don't know if you remember me. My name is Thomas. I'm your father." I couldn't speak. Tears streamed down my face. "I saw the article," he continued. "I had no idea about any of this. Your mother told me you never wanted to see me. I respected that even though it killed me. But now, can we talk, please?" "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I want to talk." My mother's world collapsed spectacularly over the next few weeks. Her friends stopped calling. Neighbors avoided her. The country club she'd been so proud to belong to quietly revoked her membership. My uncle fared even worse. His business partners, spooked by the scandal, bought him out at a fraction of his shares' worth. He had to sell his house to pay for lawyers as the district attorney's office opened a formal investigation. The people who'd once called me dramatic and ungrateful now whispered, "She was right all along, and can you imagine what she went through?" I didn't feel victorious. Mostly, I felt tired and sad. But there was relief, too. Relief that the truth was finally out, that I didn't have to carry these secrets anymore. 2 months after the article published, I received a certified letter. Inside was a check for $73,000, my original trust fund plus 16 years of interest, recovered through legal channels. I stared at it for a long time. thinking about the girl who'd worn second-hand clothes and worked minimum wage jobs, who'd believed she came from poverty. That girl deserved better. Grandma had made sure she'd finally get it. The court hearing was brief. My mother and uncle sat on one side of the room. I sat on the other with Mr. Talbot and my father, who'd driven 6 hours to be there. The judge reviewed the evidence methodically. The diary, the recordings, the video, the forged signatures, expert testimony about the handwriting analysis. My mother refused to look at me the entire time. Her lawyer tried to argue that the statute of limitations had expired on most of the fraud, that the video evidence was inadmissible. That Grandma had been mentally incompetent. But then Mr. Talbot presented Grandma's medical records, showing she'd been sharp and competent right up until her death. He played the audio recording where Grandma explicitly stated she feared for her safety. Finally, he read aloud the codicil to her will. "If Ava can prove misconduct, the house is hers," the judge repeated slowly. "And she has certainly proven misconduct. Extensive, documented, deliberate misconduct." The gavel fell with a sharp crack that echoed through the courtroom. The property known as 42 Maple Street, along with all associated assets, is hereby transferred to Miss Ava under the terms of Evelyn's codicil. This court also recommends the district attorney pursue criminal charges for fraud and elder abuse. It was official. Grandma's house was mine. Moving into Grandma's house felt surreal. For the first 2 weeks, I kept expecting her to walk around the corner, to smell her lavender perfume, to hear her humming in the kitchen. The silence was heavy, but not oppressive. It felt more like peace settling into old bones. I'd had the house professionally cleaned, but left most of Grandma's things exactly where they were. Her favorite chair by the window, her collection of teacups, the piano where we'd played duets when I was young. In the drawer of her writing desk, I found one final envelope I'd missed before. My name was written on it in Grandma's handwriting. Inside was a short letter. "My dearest Ava, if you're reading this, you found the truth and fought for it. I knew you would. You've always been braver than you believed. This house is yours now, as it should have been all along. Fill it with love and light the way it used to be, and know that I'm proud of you, prouder than words can express. You have my strength, my stubbornness, and my heart. Use them well. All my love always, Grandma." I wept for the first time since moving in. Not tears of grief or anger anymore, but tears of release, of gratitude, of love that transcended death. 3 months after the court hearing, my mother appeared at my door. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity, and perhaps some small hope for reconciliation, made me open it. She looked terrible. Hair unwashed, clothes wrinkled, dark circles under her eyes. Nothing like the composed woman who'd always cared so much about appearances. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside silently. We sat in Grandma's living room, the same room where she'd stolen my inheritance, where so many lies had been told. "You think you won," my mother said finally, her voice bitter. I looked at her steadily. "No, Grandma won. I just finished what she started." "She turned you against me." "No, you did that yourself years ago. Grandma just made sure I knew the truth." My mother stood abruptly. "I came to see if there was any chance, but I can see there isn't. You've become hard, Ava, cold." "I've become honest," I corrected. "There's a difference." She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the knob. "I'm your mother." "No," I said softly. "You stopped being my mother a long time ago. You just played the role when it suited you." She left without another word. I watched through the window as she got in her car and drove away. Then I closed the door and returned to the life I was building, one based on truth instead of lies. 6 months after moving into Grandma's house, I finally felt like it was truly mine. I'd painted the spare bedroom, planted new flowers in the garden, hosted dinner parties for friends who'd supported me through everything. My father visited every few weeks. We were rebuilding our relationship slowly, carefully, making up for lost years. He told me stories about my early childhood that my mother had erased from my memory, showed me photographs I'd never seen, gave me back pieces of myself I hadn't known were missing. One evening, I sat at Grandma's old writing desk with the window open, spring breeze carrying the scent of blooming lilacs. The diary sat on the corner of the desk, next to a framed photo of Grandma and me from my college graduation. I opened a fresh journal, a gift from my father, and uncapped a pen. At the top of the first page, I wrote, "My grandmother's diary changed everything I believed about my family. It tore apart the lies I'd lived with my whole life and replaced them with something better, the truth. Not comfortable truth or easy truth, but real truth. The kind that sets you free even as it breaks your heart. Grandma, wherever you are, you finally got the truth out. They can't take it anymore. They can't hide it or bury it or pretend it never happened. And I promise you, I'll never let anyone silence me the way they silenced you. Thank you for being brave enough to leave me the breadcrumbs. Thank you for loving me enough to protect me even after death. This house, this life, this truth, it's all because of you.